Hello everyone, welcome to the YouTube channel of the Nissan EV Owners UK group. I'm Paul Eden. In this episode I'm talking to John Fox. John is the Chief Technology Officer at Indra Renewable Technologies. Indra design and sell electric vehicle chargers. They started in 2013 and in 2023 they won ChargePoint Manufacturer of the Year, beating Hypervolt and others. I know I've got a Hypervolt and I know it's good, so you're at least as good as them. Some of Indra's chargers are very special. We'll come back to that perhaps. We will come back to that later. You haven't been at Indra very long, 3 years you told me. So tell me what you were doing before your CTO role and then tell me what you did before. And specifically, did EV chargers find you or did you find them?
Yeah, good question. Thanks, Paul. Yeah, so I've been at Indra for 3 years now. I joined, or nearly 3 years, joined looking after the engineering team, working with Mike, the founder, and then took over the CTO role. It was about 2 years ago now. Yeah, my background is aerospace, so I worked at Rolls-Royce and then General Electric, which moved me to this part of the world, down in the southwest. And the interim period was some time at a place called the Energy Systems Catapult, which is a sort of government private funded organisation trying to move forward basically renewable energy on the grid and decarbonising the energy system. And after that I was 3 years at the University of Warwick. There I was working looking after an autonomous and connected vehicle testbed program and also doing some stuff with electric vehicles and micro mobility, so things like electric bikes and e-scooters and stuff like that.
Warwick's really big in automotive, isn't it? Dr. McTurk was hugely proud of his time there, and Dr. Palmer. Both of them really talk very highly of Warick.
Yeah, it's a fantastic place. I mean, it's the facilities are incredible. The site is like a mini city. We used to describe it for people doing trials and things there. Yeah, very, very well respected university and somewhere that I'm quite proud to have spent 3 years of my life working.
Among other things, I'm going to go a bit off topic here. Among all other things, Indra is a Hindu god. How did the company come to use that name? Do you know?
So Mike, the founder, wanted to have some meaning in the name.
Oh, that's Mike's schooling, isn't it?
Yeah, Mike's schooling. And Mike, he picked Indra, I believe, because it's supposed to be the Indian god of lightning. And
that's right.
Now we were acquired by Gulf Oil International about a year ago, and they pointed out, because they have Indian roots as a company, they pointed out it's actually more the god of storms. So there's a slight mistranslation in there, but it was with good reason. It was to kind of have the link to electricity.
Indra ran the world's most intensive vehicle-to-home trial with more than 500 participants. This is perhaps what you're most known for. I imagine it was oversubscribed. Tell us about the trial.
Yeah, we could have filled the trial probably about 10 times over, to be honest.
No way, really?
Yeah, there's a lot of interest, and yeah, the benefits from the earlier Skiros trial, which was a vehicle-to-grid trial, had been well published. So I think recruitment was not difficult. We had a limited number of units and a budget to do the project, so unfortunately we had a lot of disappointed people. On the plus side, it kind of further validates that there's a demand there to bring this stuff to market. Yeah, we added, we've got over 200 houses in the vehicle-to-home trial. And we added about 50 that moved over from the earlier V2G trial, and we put about 150 more units out in the real world for the trial.
The early results for the trial, you were talking at Senx, I mean, just a week ago or so. That must have been an interesting day.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I've been going to Senx for probably 10 years now in various capacities, and it's a brilliant show. It's a great chance to see some exciting new technology and bump into an awful lot of people that you know. The trial was part of a whole section on vehicle to grid and vehicle to home. There was some really interesting stuff with kind of refuse collection vehicles, which are a really good use case because you've got a massive battery, you've got a very defined schedule, and the thing will then sit there at the depot for a long period of time after it's done its day's work. So that's a really valuable use case for V2X. But yeah, the trial got a lot of interest. We actually took the charger there probably 3 or 4 years ago. We were running a vehicle to popcorn demonstration. So we had a Leaf that was powering a popcorn machine so we didn't upset the coffee sellers and people retailing food. No one was selling popcorn, so we were giving it out for free. And it was a nice idea from the marketing team because people can smell it and hear it, so it kind of attracts a lot of people over.
On LinkedIn a couple of days ago, you made a slightly angry post, if I may, that was talking about charge cycles and how they don't kill the battery. Now, it's I mean, there's no getting away from it. Charge cycles do kill batteries, but it's not that simple, because it's like saying that heartbeats kill humans. That's perhaps not a great analogy. From what I can see, your V2H kit is charges and discharging the car much slower than a normal charger, and it's fair to say discharging the car much slower than driving it, perhaps. Being gentle is the key here, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm not going to pretend that I understand the detail of Nissan's battery chemistry enough to say whether it applies to other vehicles, but what I can say
I don't think anybody does, John.
Yeah, it's a closely guarded secret. So the level to which different vehicles will respond to different things will change, but there's a growing amount of evidence and I would say agreement in the industry that it's how you treat a battery while you're charging it is more of a measure than how many times you charge and discharge it.
I absolutely agree.
So, I mean, it's a 160 kilowatt vehicle. The charger is max 6 kilowatt. So you can see there's a pretty big difference, more than an order of magnitude between those. Indeed. In terms of what that's going to do to the battery. I mean, I actually didn't limit mine. I wanted to do a really, aggressive V2H. So I didn't limit the charge to 80% or limit the discharge. So the only limit on the vehicle was 10% minimum that the vehicle will allow you to go down to when you're discharging. And it was charging to 100% every night. So I'd love to do this again, limit the charge to 80%, and I'm sure you'd probably halve that 3.8% that I saw, to be honest.
Yeah. I saw your Leaf Spy. I saw your Leaf Spy pictures, and I could not agree more. Why vehicle to grid and why vehicle to home? What does that bring to you, to me, to everybody else around us?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, it's an interesting one. They're saying, well, look, the cost of home batteries is coming down. So Isn't this a fleeting bit of interest before home batteries become pretty easy to afford and lots of installers are starting to install them now. So it's gone from something that was a bit of an early adopter thing to something that quite a lot of people have on their walls now. Big point is the capacity. So if you go and buy Tesla Powerwall or similar, it's about 13.5 kilowatt hours.
Yeah.
A Leaf's going to be 40 or 60 on the on a new vehicle.
Well, even my knackered 2016 is still, you can't see it, is still well north of 20 kilowatts. So and that car may be worth £3,000. So in terms of economics, it's an extremely cheap battery, isn't it?
Absolutely, and it's a battery that if you're going to go electric, you've already bought it.
Yes,
so not
indeed.
only have you got a massively bigger battery, but you've also got the vehicle already. So rather than it spending 90-something% of its life sat there depreciating, it might as well spend 90% of its life sat there adding some value for you in the house.
Is the correct answer, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's funny you mentioned someone, about your value of your Leaf, because there's someone in our trial who basically has one on bricks. So that's an MOT failure, and they've just put it on bricks, and they are lucky enough to have the space to just leave it there as a battery.
So in a video that is also in the edit room, I talk about Leaf being the most sawned vehicle in the UK. There's more than 700 of them off the road, and I guarantee that the vast majority of those are, as you say, sitting on bricks, connected to the house, being a house battery.
I love it. Yeah, we've got, we probably account for 3 of those at Indra, actually. We've got some old Cornish taxis that are sawned because you can basically use them for charger testing. And then when you need the battery to be empty to carry on testing, you can discharge it and stick it back into the building. So we've got some that have had a really tough life down in Cornwall, and then they've come and had a tougher life sat out the side of our building in Malvern.
This is about balancing the grid, isn't it? Well, vehicle to grid is about balancing the grid, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, although the way you do it changes with V2G and V2H, that's it. The price of energy and the carbon intensity of energy varies through the day. More and more, it's becoming an issue in terms of your carbon footprint of when you use energy than how much you actually use. So if you can move your house to have a very level demand during the day using a battery, then you're doing a lot for the grid. And if you can then skew it so your demand's high when everybody else's is low, and vice versa, even discharge from your house when everyone else's is high, you're actually kind of helping to mitigate other houses' impact as well as your own. And that was the difference between the Skirus trial, the V2G, and this V2H trial. Is that the V2G was just a grid event, high value, high cost energy, and there'd be a signal sensor charger to discharge, and please give us as much back as you can to mitigate that. V2H is kind of behind the meter arbitrage. So at a house level, I'm not doing any deals with my energy provider. There's no signal from the grid as such. I've got an off-peak window and on-peak time. And what the charger is basically doing is seeking the best value for the house. So it tends to charge for 4 or 5 hours overnight, and it tends to discharge at a rate that matches the house to zero import during the day.
There's no easy way to say this. CHAdeMO is being phased out. I mean, at the moment, Nissan aren't building cars with CHAdeMO connectors. How's that going to affect what you do?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, this is why these chargers aren't more widely available, because to bring a product to market and all the industrialization work that goes into making that a high volume product would have been on a product that's basically being sunsetted by the manufacturer. CHAdeMO works really well. It's a shame, to be honest, that we didn't just adopt it in my view, but we've taken the CCS standard and that's coming through now. So that's really put a big delay on it. All these trials that have proved things through 2018, 19, 20, right up to now, should have spawned a production product by now.
Yes.
A combination of the CCS changeover from the CHAdeMO standard and manufacturers being quite risk averse about this, which was kind of the reason for the post that you mentioned earlier on LinkedIn about the battery degradation. It's frustrating because they're talking a good game, and they know that they want to be part of it. But I feel like there's a combination of concern for battery warranty when they've not had the years of experience that Nissan have had by being pioneers in this space.
Yeah, and as I understand it, Nissan were happy to help, and all of your equipment was Nissan certified. But there's no reason why CCS can't do this technically. It's available in the software and the hardware, but as you say, we need to get these companies, these people, to understand that there is a lot of value there. Also, we should say at this point that CHAdeMO was a really good software standard, and CCS perhaps not so much. I mean, we've all seen Jaguar drivers fumbling with their chargers, failing to handshake. No, and it's not just Jaguar as well. So CHAdeMO was a superior standard in many ways, not just in the bidirectional stuff.
It was certainly, let's say, better thought out in terms of the fact that it's partitioned and it's a dedicated comms protocol. So there's a lot of noise around a CCS vehicle. Early on in the early days, we had some vehicles that I won't name that if someone had power line adapters in their internet 3 doors down, the car would start to do weird things because it was picking them up. It's a noisy environment, and it utilizes essentially wires that are already there to pass signals that they're not dedicated for that purpose. So it has its frailties. The other side is the standard that brings in the bidirectional stuff, so 15118-20, brings in a lot of other stuff as well. Like plug and charge, so the vehicle, basically the idea the vehicle can be known and you don't have to mess around with apps and things like that.
Yes, the vehicle is happy to give away, but to make its identity known to the charger. Yes, which is what Tesla really do very well.
Yeah, absolutely. You get the state of charge, of course, which is really important for charge optimization. And there's lots of other kind of cybersecurity, elements in there as well. As a result, it's a massive standard. There's a lot in there, and that's why another issue I think has been that OEMs have done parts of it, not all of it.
So it's your plan to do what you do with bidirectional chargers using CCS2. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we've got a prototype. So we've done,
Okay.
so not at the point of being on people's walls, but we've done demonstrations, and we've got the kit, we've written the software stack. But the business case to take a DC charger, which is an expensive piece of kit compared to an AC charger, to take that and offer that as a product to people when you've got a limited number of vehicles that we'll work with, limited number of manufacturers that have actually come out and said, yes, you can use that kit, and a limited number that are not putting limits on the thing, which kind of affect the business case. It's really close, but it's not there at the moment to be something that will sell quite to the level that it should to justify its existence. But yeah, you're right. It's pretty simple. It's just to talk and do the handshake and all the rest of it. The fundamentals of transferring the power and getting the grid code certification are all the same.
Your core business is making AC EV chargers that are on the front of people's houses. Why isn't Indra better known in the EV community? When a new owner asks which home charger they buy, people say Rollox Hypervolt Point. They rarely say Indra. Now, the Smart Lux and the Smart Pro, I read, are really good chargers, but we don't see enough of them out and about.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. I think one thing that we've been guilty of as a company is we've put a lot of focus on R&D, which is great. So the names you mentioned have not been doing trials for 5 years, developing bi-directional equipment, for example.
Yes, it did.
And you've always got to make a call about where you're going to apply your efforts. And as a business, we've probably applied a lot more than the competition to R&D. And that's great. That means from a value perspective, we've got a lot of know-how, a lot of IP. That means that we're in a good place to exploit bi-directional relative to competitors. But yeah, in terms of the aggressive approach to kind of selling a lot of chargers, we've probably not done as much as they've done. As I say, the chargers you mentioned, there's a lot of good chargers in there. I wouldn't for a moment suggest there's anything that's better than ours. But marketing and commercial kind of efforts do affect sales. It's something that we've addressed quite a lot in the last sort of 6 to 9 months. So we've spent a lot of time really dedicating ourselves to making sure we've got all of the tariffs enabled on our chargers, making sure that we're working on things like customer journey, on kind of business to business sales, things like that. So it's something that we've started to do a lot of work on, because although it's great to work for a company that's doing such incredible things in R&D and have conversations like this, you've got to keep the lights on. You've got to actually make sure that you're making those sales. So yeah, we definitely don't have the market share that we should.
Are we likely to see large-scale open sales of these bi-directional devices? I mean, I was going to say the price needs to come down, but in actual fact, what you charged in the trial was £1,600. In the grand scale of things, that's not a great deal, more than a good, a nice charger.
Yeah, I mean, to cover the cost point, I mean, we very heavily subsidise these things. So unfortunately,
I'm sure you did.
They cost more than £1,600. That was really to put it towards the install and to make sure that the people we got signed up to the trial, before we went and did the kind of DNO applications and things, we knew that they were serious and they really, really wanted one of these things. You've got to be careful when you give things away free, because people will kind of grab them even if they're not that interested.
Yeah.
The short answer is yes, Paul. There's going to be a mass adoption of this. The challenge is getting over some of the final hurdles. So making sure that we've got standards. You mentioned the CCS stuff squared away, making sure the vehicles are enabled by the OEMs and they're not too scared about the impact on the battery. And that's why my post on LinkedIn that you mentioned was so impassioned, because I think it's something that we're overemphasizing as a risk, and to make sure that we can get a value proposition that makes sense to people, because we've got a skew towards early adopters in the trial, as you'd expect. You've got a skew to early adopters by having an electric vehicle, frankly, at the moment still. It's got to be really simple. People have got to be sure there's going to be enough charge in the car when I get home, that I know what's happening. I'm not concerned that I'm going to discharge the thing and end up with no miles to get anywhere. Because it's a car before it's a battery on wheels. Unless, of course, you take the wheels off and put it on bricks like some people.
Project Screus, if that's how we say it, and neither of us are entirely sure, was first, though, running between 2018 and 2021. And this was for the nerdy of us, and I'm going to put us both in that bracket, more exciting because it was vehicle to grid, or as we call it, vehicle to G. OVO, Senx, and Nissan were all in on this, although it was a rather smaller trial, wasn't it? 320.
So, I mean, it validated a lot of things that have been done on paper about payback periods and things like that, and how people would understand it. But I think the main learning, to be honest, was how people were going to interact with this stuff. So would people actually plug the car in? People that plug in when they need a charge, would they get used to coming home and plugging the car in all the time? Would they perceive the benefits? Would they properly kind of understand that plugging the car in and losing some charge was giving them some value back? And crucially, after living with it for a year or two, would they say, please leave it on my wall, I want to keep it? And that
was that an option?
Yeah, so I think it was 320 odd that we installed. And
yes.
I'm pretty sure every single one stayed on
really?
On the wall. Yeah, of the 210 or so that we've got in the V2H trial, over 50 of them were still on the V2G and wanted to switch over to the V2H.
So when the trial, let me just get this right. So when both trials ended, you left the equipment with the, well, of course, because they paid for it, but you left the equipment with the owner. And they retained all of that functionality.
Yeah, that's right. So the benefits were kind of concluded at the end of the project, and all the kind of maths was done on payback periods and things like that. But most of those units are still out there going strong now.
John, I want to thank you for your time, for talking to us today, and for perhaps lifting the lid on the bidirectional charging stuff that I feel we should know a lot more about.
Thanks, Paul. Really enjoyed talking.
Good man. You're a gentleman. Thank you very much.